All right, welcome to lesson 0.3. What are we going to learn this year? And that may be a question you are asking yourself. And even if it's a question you're not asking yourself, it's one I am happy to answer. As a reminder, expectations for all videos. This video and Schoology are the only windows that you should have open, the only tabs you should have open. If you're doing your notes electronically, then of course that tab would probably be open as well. For these videos, you probably should have your computer open for about 20 minutes. Now, if it takes 22, that's fine. But we want to be mindful of our time in class. And then also remember, anything in green means you're going to write this down on your guided notes or type it into your guided notes if you're choosing to do them electronically. So again, remember, when the writing appears in green, then make sure you write it in your notes, and we will always have a lesson question in green as well. And this is what you should write in this red circle. What am I going to learn this year? That is our lesson question. And some of this may be review for you. If it's not, that's completely fine too. So we're going to jump in. Remember, you should have, what am I going to learn this year in this circle up here. Key issues, they'll be in green. You write them in the gray boxes. And then anything else you find important or interesting, you want to pause the video and write it down. You certainly can do that and write that in the white box down below. So key issue number one is this class can go by a couple names: social studies or geography. Primarily, I'm going to call it geography, but know that the two terms can be used interchangeably. And so if someone says to me as a teacher, what do I teach? I usually just say geography, because if I say social studies, that is an umbrella term that can stand for many different things, right? So an umbrella term means that under the umbrella, many things can fit into the larger term. And in this case, it's social studies. Social studies can be geography, it can be history, it can be economics, it can be sociology, it can be psychology, it can be civics, it can be anthropology. So it can be many different things. And so you may hear me say geography in class. You may hear me say social studies. On your Infinite Campus, it probably says social studies. Your parents might say, what are you doing in social studies? Just know that means geography and vice versa. It can be confusing. Like I said, I'll do my best to stick with geography, but geography is a social study, so they both can be used somewhat interchangeably. Key issue number two, and this is really where we start the crux of what we're going to learn. The world is broken into 4 hemispheres. In this class, we're going to focus on the northeastern and the southeastern hemispheres, the ones that are in the red circle here. Next year, you're going to focus on the western hemisphere. So that's going to be everything over here, okay? And so just know that there are 4 hemispheres. There's a northern, there's a southern, there's a western, and there's an eastern, right? And so consequently, you can have a northwestern, a northeastern, a southwestern, and a southeastern hemisphere as well. But our focus is going to be the northeastern and the southeastern. So basically, we cover the eastern hemisphere in this class. Key issue number 3. In this class, we're going to be asking ourselves to answer 3 questions throughout the lessons. Like I just said, we used to not do it this way. And 8th grade used to be only physical geography, and 9th grade was kind of the human geography piece, which is more about culture and the history. However, we found that it got very, very boring and tiresome for both the teachers and the students. So we got together with the 9th grade teachers and said, how about we just cut the world in half? And we just kind of do both physical and human geography, and we just cut the world in half. 8th grade will do Eastern Hemisphere, 9th grade will do Western Hemisphere. And that's what we agreed upon 5 years ago. So as we go through the Eastern Hemisphere, we're going to be asking ourselves 3 basic questions and hopefully answering them. First, what does it look like there? That's the physical geography piece. Okay, talking about landforms primarily. And then we'll move on to what has it been like there? And that's really going to be the historical piece of it. So what is the history of a region of the world, in China been like, or in Russia, or the Philippines? And then lastly, we're asking, what is it like there today? And that's kind of the culture piece of it. So what religions are practiced there? How do they dress? Excuse me, what do they eat? What are the gender roles there? Stuff like that. So those are the questions we're going to be asking ourselves. They may not always go in order, and they may not always be spelled out directly to you. Sometimes you're going to have to dig a little bit and realize that these questions are being answered in a variety of ways. Key issue number 4. Please know there are almost 200 countries in the world and 7 continents. I have them labeled here. Now, I say almost 200. There are exactly 195, but there are, at any given point in this time, disputed borders, countries that aren't being recognized. And so right now the official count is 195, but that does change. And a lot of times it depends on the source or who you're asking. And so we're going to just say there's about 200 countries because it can fluctuate between 192 and 197 depending on certain circumstances. It used to be there's only 4 oceans, and now people recognize a 5th ocean called the Southern Ocean down here by Antarctica. And so it's kind of a matter of perspective. Not everyone recognizes that 5th ocean. Some people just consider that part of the Pacific and the Atlantic Ocean. So for that reason, I always just say there's about 200 countries. If you want to get very specific, right now there's 195, but it can change. One thing that won't change is there are 7 continents. I don't think that's changing anytime soon. The continents are large bodies of land that are home to many countries. The only exception to this is Australia. Australia is a country. It's also its own continent. I have Oceania in parentheses there because some people refer to it as Oceania, depicting that it's not just Australia, it's Australia and New Zealand and Papua New Guinea and some other countries that make up Australia. I still call it Australia. I think the book will call it both. So that's why I put it in parentheses. So if you see Oceania, they're talking about Australia. I still call it Australia. So that's what we'll do. We will focus on the Eastern Hemisphere. So remember, that's anything kind of down this line, which they call the prime meridian, and over here. So we will focus on Europe. We'll do all of Europe, although technically not all of it's in the Eastern Hemisphere. Same thing with Africa. There are portions of Africa that are west of the prime meridian, but we still can include them. We will talk about Asia. And if time allows, we'll talk about Australia. It's rare we get that far, but that is my hope this year. We will not talk about Antarctica unless we really have a lot of time or we do an extension activity. But Antarctica is so broad, it covers both hemispheres, and to be honest, there's not a whole lot going on down there. So we'll see. Key issue number 5, like I've already kind of said, is that the equator, this line right here, is an imaginary line. It's not physically there. You would not go to Africa and see it. There would be markers that would say you can stand in both hemispheres and stuff like that, but it's not like it's a red line that you can visibly see. That divides the northern and the southern hemisphere, and then the prime meridian right here is this line, and that divides the western from the eastern hemisphere. So those are our 2 main lines that we have to know, because when we're plotting points or looking up locations, they are based off of these two imaginary lines. 0, 0, if we're plotting points, would be right where they intersect, which is in the ocean. But we'll get to that in future lessons. Whoops, sorry. Okay, nice work. You're done with the notes. You can now move on to the 0.3 assignment. This assignment is going to be located in the labeled bin in the back of the classroom. It's in the file folder that just says 0.3. You will need 4 colored pencils: blue, red, green, brown, and you're also going to need the very beginning of the textbook for the atlas, pages A4 and A5, I believe. You may also need the Chromebook to look up a couple questions, but you can also use the index as well. So congratulations on finishing the notes and the video. You are free to move on to the assignment.